Apparently, Nikita Khrushchev paid his bar tab by giving Crimea to Ukraine. But then Turkey tried to steal it from the tip jar when the EU ran out of the pub chasing after its long-lost love, the United Kingdom. Meanwhile, Russia claims that Ukraine is using weapons banned by the Geneva Convention and that Ukrainian servicemen are psychologically unfit to carry weapons. None of that is true because this is StopFake, the place where we break down Russian disinformation about Ukraine and a little more. So let's get to it. That Soviet Premier Nikita Khrushchev drunkenly gave Crimea to Ukraine in 1954 is one of the most prevalent Russian propaganda narratives being peddled by the Kremlin since 2014. Recently, it has reappeared in several publications, albeit with a new twist, alleging that Ukraine has admitted that after the collapse of the USSR in 1991, Ukraine got Crimea through a drunken sleight of hand, as Crimeans had no right to vote after the fall of the USSR, and the fate of the peninsula was completely in the hands of the Ukrainian administration. Now, no one in the Ukrainian government has ever said anything about Ukraine receiving Crimea through some drunken fluke, because that is simply untrue. The Ukrainian government official Russian media refer to is one Ivan Yermakov, the former chairman of the Sevastopol city administration. Yermakov became infamous for his pro-Russian views and rhetoric. In 2014, when Russia invaded and occupied Crimea, Yermakov supported the annexation, and in 2020, he ran for mayor of Sevastopol. No surprise there. But Yermakov does not represent any Ukrainian administration and has nothing to do with Ukraine's current administration. According to Ukrainian historian Dr. Serhiy Hromenko, the alleged drunken handover of Crimea to Ukraine has long existed as a joke. In his speech about the occupation of Crimea by Russian forces, Russian President Vladimir Putin legitimized the joke by claiming that the handover of Crimea to Ukraine in 1954 was personally initiated by the head of the Communist Party, Nikita Khrushchev. In reality, history shows us otherwise, says Hromenko. Khrushchev did not rule unilaterally in 1954, and he could not have given Crimea to Ukraine single-handedly. That decision was taken collectively by all of the Soviet Union's governing bodies. The law on transferring Crimea from the Russian Federation to the Ukrainian Soviet Socialist Republic is signed by the chairman of the Supreme Soviet, Clement Voroshilov, and the secretary of the Presidium, Nikolai Pegov. Hromenko said, quote, "There was no one-man rule by Khrushchev in 1954. If we look at who signed the documents transferring Crimea, we will see all the key players, Molotov, Voroshilov, and many others. To attribute the handover of the peninsula to Khrushchev alone is to create a psychological distortion, a kind of cognitive effect. And the same goes for Khrushchev's alleged drunkenness. According to Hromenko, this myth arose as a result of Khrushchev's extravagant behavior, such as banging his shoe on a desk at the United Nations. If he behaved this way, he must be drinking, goes the reasoning. Now, it's kind of hard to argue with that, but there is no proof that Khrushchev was a chronic alcoholic. This is just another myth that gets repeated again and again, and finally Putin quotes it and the myth takes on a perverted political form, Hromenko explains. As for the claim that Crimeans had no voice in deciding their future after the Soviet Union fell apart, this is another complete lie. In 1991, Crimeans voted in 3 polls to decide the future of the peninsula. First, on January the 21st, 1991, Crimeans voted in a referendum to renew the peninsula's autonomy. Then, on March the 17th, they voted to remain in a new reconstituted USSR. But that poll could not be realized as the Soviet Union fell apart. But finally, on December the 1st, 1991, Crimeans voted in a referendum on Ukrainian independence, with the majority supporting independence. Russian and the proxy media have claimed that Ukrainian military have used white phosphorus munitions, weapons that are banned under the Geneva Convention. However, the mine fragments they have shown as evidence are of a different type of munition. On February 19th, the occupied Donetsk television station Union reported in its newscast that near the city of Horlyuka, some 56 kilometers north of Donetsk city, the center of the self-proclaimed Donetsk People's Republic, the Ukrainian side had fired white phosphorus bombs on Russian-supported proxy formations. A sturdy-set man dressed in camouflage speaks to the camera, claiming that the Ukrainian side is firing on Russia's proxy units without reason and is even using munitions banned by the Geneva Convention. The man then points to a series of neatly arranged mortar shells and pieces of shrapnel and holds up one as an example of the alleged white phosphorus munition that was fired by the Ukrainian military. But, according to military expert Alexei Zinchenko, the shrapnel pieces displayed on the Union TV news story are D-832-DU smoke bombs, the body of which is filled with a smoke-generating substance that does not actually contain phosphorus. Such smoke bombs are used to provide smoke screens, and the phosphorus they contain is not white phosphorus. These smoke bombs are not prohibited by any conventions, says Zinchenko. The Russian military uses such smoke bombs, and the shrapnel shown on the occupied television newscast could very well have been the remnants of ammunition that the Russian proxy forces use courtesy of the regular Russian army. While use of white phosphorus for incendiary weapons in civilian areas is banned under the Geneva Convention, Western militaries use phosphorus in grenades, mortar shells, and artillery shells to mark targets and to provide smokescreen for troop movements. A recent meeting of the EU-Ukraine Association Council and the ensuing discussion about revising the association treaty between Ukraine and the EU has brought on a surge of Russian disinformation and propaganda about Ukraine's European choice. Russian media have always been harshly critical and disparaging about Ukraine's European aspirations and have called the EU-Ukraine agreement a, quote, 5-year catastrophe in all spheres of life. Keeping mum about Russia's annexation of Ukraine's Crimea and Russia's financing of the war in eastern Ukraine, which have significantly impacted on Ukraine's economic situation, the newspaper Vzglyad and the web newspaper Regnum.ru shamelessly blame the EU agreement for Ukraine's economic and political woes. Signed in 2014 and effective since September 1st, 2017, the Ukraine-European Union Association Agreement commits Ukraine to economic, judicial, and financial reforms to bring its policy and legislation in line with those of the EU, while the EU commits to provide Ukraine with political and financial support, access to knowledge and research, and preferential access to EU markets. The Vzglyad article resorts to oft-repeated Russian disinformation tropes that Western countries provoked a coup in Ukraine because former President Yanukovych refused to sign the agreement, which was unfavorable to Ukraine, that the free trade aspect of the agreement has had a detrimental effect on the country's economy, that visa-free travel to the EU has depopulated Ukraine, that Ukraine has lost the enormous CIS market and worsened its relations with Russia, and that the EU seeks to completely colonize Ukraine. The Ukrainian Center for European Policy is a research group that has been analyzing Ukraine's implementation of the EU Association Agreement from 2015 through 2019. According to their report, the overall progress in meeting commitments for this period is 41.6%. This includes not only sectors in which all targets have been fully met, but also intermediate results. Now, within this figure, 12.4% of these sectors are completely in line with EU requirements, legislation passed and/or implemented. 10.4% are in an advanced implementation stage, for example, legislative work done, but not all the necessary bylaws enacted, and 18.9% in the earlier implementation stage. Regulations and/or implementation are in their initial stages. According to the Center's report, the sectors where change to EU standards is most successful are government procurement, company operations, trade barriers, national security and defense, foreign and defense policy, energy, consumer protection, and taxation. The Ukraine-European Union Association Council met for its annual meeting on February the 11th in Brussels. The Council confirmed a review of the agreement's objectives and agreed to assess and review the liberalization of trade in goods within the free trade zone. Ukrainian Prime Minister Denis Shmyhal stressed that the revision of the agreement will help increase trade between Ukraine and the EU and lead to a further convergence of Ukrainian and EU economies. Russian media continue to actively propagate disinformation about Ukrainian-Turkish relations and the relationship between Ankara and the Kremlin. Back on February the 12th, several pro-Kremlin publications announced that Turkey has unveiled a plan to seize parts of Russia. The publications claim that a Turkish state television channel showed a map with neighboring states marked up to indicate which territories Turkey would seize. Among the marked areas were Crimea and parts of eastern Ukraine's Donbas region. But there was absolutely no discussion about seizing neighboring territory in the Turkish television program Russian media refer to. In fact, the discussions explored ways of expanding Turkey's political influence to neighboring countries. The map, which Russian media presented as Ankara's secret plan, was in fact published in The Next 100 Years, a forecast for the 21st century, a 2009 book by George Friedman, an American geopolitical forecaster and international affairs strategist, and the founder of the Stratford Research Group. Friedman believes that by 2050, Turkey will become the strongest regional geopolitical player and will extend its spheres of influence both to the Arab world and to European countries. This is the forecast that is shown on the map. Friedman's forecast does not include any Turkish territorial expansion. In Chapter 8, devoted to Turkey, Friedman writes the following, quote, When the Russians finally collapse, the Turks will be left in a position they haven't been in for a century. Surrounded by chaos and weakness, the Turks will have an economic presence throughout the region. The regional geopolitics will reorganize around the Turks, who will become the dominant power in the region, projecting influence in all directions. Turkey has repeatedly stated that it does not support the illegal occupation of Crimea by Russia and opposes the annexation of the peninsula. Turkey has never expressed any claims on Crimea. In December of last year, Turkey's Minister of Foreign Affairs Mevlut Çavuşoğlu once again emphasized that Turkey would continue its non-recognition policy of the annexation of the Ukrainian peninsula. Turkey's priority remains that the Crimean Tatars living in Crimea continue to live in prosperity and security in their historical homeland, protect their cultural identity, and end their suffering as a result of the occupation, the Turkish Foreign Ministry said in a statement on the 6th anniversary of the illegal occupation of Crimea. Russian media were disseminating stories last month claiming that 120 Ukrainian servicemen should be suspended from duty and from handling weapons because of psychological issues. This fake, carried by such Russian disinformation sites as Novorossiya, Seldon.News, and Obyvatel, cite the press service of self-proclaimed Luhansk People's Republic's so-called People's Militia. From the trenches to the psych ward, warns the Novorossiya headline. The publication claims that a psychological support group conducted an inspection at Ukraine's 92nd Military Brigade and found that 112 servicemen should be suspended from carrying weapons because of psychological problems. The support group allegedly also recommended inpatient psychiatric treatment for 8 other servicemen. StopFake fact-checkers reached out to the Ukrainian military asking about the Russian media claims. Joint Forces Deputy Commander Volodymyr Kidon said in a statement that the military group referred to in the fake story has not had any problems with any of its soldiers. No psychological problems or incidents were noted among the servicemen in that section, and the claims circulated on various Russian sites are fakes. Now, Russian media are very prolific in producing fakes about Ukraine's military. One of the latest such misinformation efforts debunked by StopFake was about Ukrainian paratroopers infecting fellow military with COVID after training in Western Ukraine, and you can read more about that on our website, stopfake.org. That's it for this week. Be vigilant, stay safe, and be on the lookout for fakes. Getting vaccinated, wearing a mask, washing your hands, and social distancing will protect you from the coronavirus, but critical thinking will still protect you from Russian disinformation. And if you spot any disinformation about Ukraine, forward it to us for a truth autopsy. I'm Marko Suprun, and this is StopFake. Thanks for watching.